Hello and welcome to the latest of my Inside Tracks. Today I'm going to explore a magical alliance between Mercury, the planet of communication, of talk and thought, in the earthy sensual Taurus, and Neptune, the planet of dreams, imagination, healing, but also compassion, in the watery sign of Pisces, which it rules. Now these two started to collaborate with one another in a 60-degree angle within 3 degrees from the 7th of June. It's going to complete on the 11th when Mercury makes its way into the sign of Gemini, but it becomes exact on the 9th, and this is at 9:14 p.m. Universal Time. So the angle they're forging to one another is a sextile. This is 60 degrees. And this is where planets can inspire and encourage one another. And first of all, we need to have a look at what the energies of Mercury and Neptune represent in a bit more detail. Then I'm going to share how they're going to interact in the houses that they're in terms of the overall solar chart, but also just take a brief look at the Placidus chart as well, because that gives us some different perspectives. Also, when this event occurs, Saturn is exactly conjunct the moon in Pisces, so I feel that that is going to inform this event quite a lot. Thank you so much for joining me. If you're new to my channel, I'd be honoured if you would subscribe. Please click or tap on the bell notification symbol. If you're a returning visitor, thank you so much for joining me once more. If you'd like to get your free written daily horoscope fired to your device, please see the link beneath this video where you can subscribe. I provide an overview of each day which focuses on the most dominant planetary influence, but then go through each of the 12 signs from Aries through to Pisces. Now, as this event manifests, let's just have a little bit of a look at what Mercury in Taurus is about. It has a very practical way of thinking about things like resources. But if you recall, when Mercury moved into Taurus on the 3rd of April, on the 7th it went into its pre-retrograde shadow. The retrograde began on the 21st of April. It ended on the 15th of May. It then it went back into its post-retrograde shadow, which it emerged from on the 31st of May. So if you found that the financial side of your situation has felt sluggish, bogged down, hard to resolve, we're all grappling with higher costs for sure, but if things have been going very slowly, that is why, because of that journey, because ordinarily Mercury sweeps through the zodiac signs very, very quickly. But Mercury in Taurus tends to have a little bit more of a conservative outlook on marshalling resources, and doesn't necessarily act in a particularly impetuous way. But earlier this week, Mercury aligned with Uranus, and you may have found, like I did, that suddenly I had the urge to grapple with some issues that perhaps I'd been finding it difficult to really find the motivation around, because Uranus brought speed and electricity to the more sluggish vibe of Mercury in Taurus. So that's been helpful in recharging the vibe. Also, if there has been any discussions around finance and you've had a particular viewpoint and encountered someone who sees things very differently, it may be because people can be inclined to be a little bit more attached to their values with Mercury in the sign of Taurus. But of course, Mercury itself is very much about quick wits through its rulership of Gemini, and can be very funny as well, and the generation of ideas. So if you have been thinking of some new ways to generate new income, or to think about how you can reshape your own sense of self-worth and values, that's where Mercury's been working in Taurus in a positive way. And of course, this is a sign that's ruled by Venus, so it's inherently sensual. So thinking about anything to do with food, clothes, making and creating may also have been part of the journey. Now, as this event occurs in terms of the solar chart, Mercury is in house 2, and so we're all, as I mentioned before, needing to be a bit thriftier, a bit more conscious of the things that in the past maybe wouldn't be have quite been micromanaging in the same way. But you may also have found that you have created some new opportunities by this thinking. Although it's not the best of times to be very impetuous, I feel that the more earthy and fixed energy of Taurus can actually slow Mercury down in some ways in quite a moderating but positive way. Now, Neptune in Pisces is a water sign, of course, which Neptune is the co-ruler of. It's mutable, so it's flexible, unlike the fixed energy of Taurus, and it gives us an opportunity to really grapple with anything to do with mysticism, metaphysics like astrology, but also healing, our appreciation of things to do with seclusion and quiet and reflection can also have been boosted since 2012 whilst Neptune's been working through this area. You may have also found since 2012 that your way of relating to different belief systems, which comes from the Jupiterian rulership of Pisces, may have gone through some big shifts, like some people returning to traditional religions that maybe were part of their younger life, or breaking free of them, or embracing new ways of looking at things. But the other thing that's really probably become much more endemic since 2012 is the embrace and much more freely discussed use of drugs. And this may have been in some ways because people wanted to create some escapism from the harsh realities of life. But obviously drugs come in lots of different forms. You know, if we vape, it's a drug through the tobacco. So whatever intoxicants it's been, there's probably been more prevalence of that. Certainly I think we're much more conscious of the power that can have. It doesn't matter whether it's prescribed medicaments or things that people produce themselves or get in a more illicit way. But one of the things that Neptune can do in the 12th house is see us more prone to anxieties and worries, and our imagination can run away from us. So we can at times think the worst. And that's where it's important that if we do anything that gives us that a few hours of escapism, that in some ways it may be to try to avoid looking at some painful stuff that may be deeper within us. So the other thing about Neptune in the 12th house is the sector of secret enemies. But because Neptune is a very gassy and very intangible influence, sometimes when people are against us, they may not necessarily assert it in a very obvious way. Now, as Mercury goes into Gemini, it just so happens that it is going to be squaring up to Neptune through its journey, and that's something we need to be very aware of, is the company we keep and the things that we share. Now, in terms of the event chart solar, therefore, I think that this would be a great time to help those who are less fortunate. The practical energies of Mercury in the second house could be, for example, leaving the change we have in the local store, putting it in the charity box. It may be a few bits and pieces of change, but that can build up and help people. Or donating some spare food from the back of your cupboard to the local food bank. We're seeing floods in the Ukraine, which are causing devastation. But of course, there's also some big issues going on still in Syria and obviously the Sudan. So if you are fortunate enough to have some spare money, those are good causes that you might consider. But another thing that we can do because of the practicality of Mercury in Taurus is think about the practical things that we no longer need. So that could be decluttering our homes from goods and items that have served their purpose for us but are still totally functional, very Taurus, and those can be recycled to charity shops or for people who would really appreciate them. I mean, I love going in charity shops. It's something that gives me a great thrill if you suddenly find a really nice shirt or jacket that's in pretty good condition, great value, but the money goes to a good cause. How good is that? So in this relationship between Mercury and Neptune, I think our compassion and understanding, how we think about life, can be used to relate and empathize with those who perhaps see life in a different way or who have a different experience. Now, also, it's a great opportunity to visualize. So, because Neptune is very much linked to cinema, film, photography, if we even want to daydream, that can be a wonderful way to give ourselves something of a boost. But if you have got an interest in music or the arts or literature, because obviously the writing side of Mercury in Gemini, that works really well with the imagination of Neptune. Now, some people take a great deal of store by mindfulness. This has become quite a buzz movement. But of course, meditation is not a new thing. And just sitting quietly or going for a walk in the countryside where it's very quiet and peaceful, being by a lake, hearing wildlife, getting closer to nature, these are all really restorative things. The earth and also the nature, very Tauran, linking with the escapism, but in a very quiet and healing way, very Piscean. Now, in terms of the event chart Placidus, obviously in the solar chart, that combination between Saturn and the moon that I mentioned earlier could see some of those anxieties be triggered a little bit more, because Saturn can be more restrictive. But the event chart in Placidus sees Mercury actually in the 4th house of home, family and emotion, and ironically Neptune in the 2nd house, which is of course a rather Taurus feel. So home pursuits and hobbycraft, so the 4th house, what we can do to make our home space work for us in some kind of way. So family connections, making food, making homemade wine, very Piscean, getting out the old family photographs and images and reminiscing, talking things through, doing some journaling with those who we're close to, or just if we're on our own, pausing to take a breath. So that's my little bit of a recap on a really lovely aspect between these two. When the event becomes exact on the 9th, that combination between Saturn and the moon is interesting, because the moon in Pisces is particularly sensitive, and that's going to amplify the energies of Neptune, which soaks up in sometimes an ephemeral way all the energies around us. And Saturn is therefore going to emphasize any kind of environmental issue, whether it's noise or whether it's just the particular place that we're in at that time, or whether it's the energy of the people that we're experiencing. I think Saturn is going to make it more practically vivid, which could be a bit of a challenge, but Mercury can help us think about it and take that information in a solid way, stay strong, and find ways to make this energy work for us as constructively as possible. Now, if you would like to gain a much more profound understanding of how Sirius astrology can be active in your life, if you give me 3 pieces of personal birth data of time, date and place of birth, I can prepare for you your life roadmap report. This will give you a much more intimate understanding of the patterns that have played out all through your life, all through your journey, but also how you can seize on the opportunities more firmly, but also try to work with the more challenging influences that may have at times been quite problematic. And that's one of the great assets of more technical astrology. And in my special package of 30% off, you can also get your 12-month forecast, totally unique to you, will give you searing insights of the month ahead. If you don't have your time, my solar package does the same thing, still 30% off, and will also give you enormous extra understandings. It's been a real pleasure being with you. Thank you so much for joining me. Please like, comment, or subscribe.